Welcome to Burlington and Beyond. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Paul Gerard, and on the panel with me I have Joan Kennedy Constant. And tonight we have a special guest. We have Michael King from the Massachusetts Family Institute. And Mike is the Director of Community Alliances with the Massachusetts Family Institute. So thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I'll just read a quick intro about Massachusetts Family Institute. It's dedicated to strengthening the family and affirming the Judeo-Christian values upon which it is based. Established in 1991, MFI is a nonpartisan public policy organization dedicated to strengthening families in Massachusetts. MFI engages in research and education on a wide range of public policy issues to strengthen the well-being, health, and safety of families, its individual members, and the collective unit. So that's a brief summary of MFI, but fortunately we have Mike here to give us a lot more details and let us know about MFI and some of the great work they've done in Massachusetts. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you. So I guess personally, I live in Westford, Massachusetts, so I had to travel about a half hour to get here tonight, out on 495. But I have a lovely wife and 5 kids. We just had we have a 4-month-old at home, so my wife is very busy. But we call it a good busy at home. So, but yes, you mentioned that I work for Massachusetts Family Institute, the Director of Community Alliances. So I try and network with churches and community groups all over the Bay State, Western Massachusetts, Worcester, Greater Boston area, to really work together on 3 main issues that we concentrate on, which would be the sanctity of life, natural marriage, and religious liberty. And then I'm sure a lot of your viewers are aware of the question 4 that we passed in 2016 on recreational marijuana, and we've been partnering with a lot of advocates in the state to help towns and cities understand how they can ban recreational marijuana in their town or city. So we've been pretty busy.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of work, a lot of issues to cover.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but we enjoy it, and we've been in Massachusetts for over 26 years, and a lot of people don't realize that MFI, Massachusetts Family Institute, is a local affiliate of Focus on the Family. So a lot of your viewers are probably familiar with Focus on the Family, James Dobson. There are about 40 MFIs, if you will, institutes in the United States. So 40 states have an advocate when it comes to family values. We find that states that don't have an advocate, like Rhode Island, like Vermont, and other states, a lot of these concerning laws are getting passed a lot quicker in states that are not raising awareness to some of these things, because you know as well as I do that many people are out there raising their kids and making a living and don't always know what's going on in their public school, don't always know what's going on at their state house. So we try and raise awareness to that.
That's great. That's a good point, that without an organization like MFI, a lot of these issues can just, they get passed without much notice, and they'll slip right through the legislature without much opposition because, like you say, people are busy, living their lives and working, and it's hard to keep up on all these issues. So it's great to have an organization like that, and we're fortunate to have that in Massachusetts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think something we were going to talk about tonight as well is a really important event coming up for MFI, which is our lobby day at the State House. It's our annual pro-family lobby day, an opportunity for people in Burlington or any town or city in Massachusetts to come to the State House. And we will have a brief training for people, and then they will have the opportunity to go and speak face-to-face to their legislator, their state representative, or their state senator in regard to a lot of the issues that I'm sure we'll touch on tonight, including physician-assisted suicide, recreational marijuana, the counseling ban, the sex ed mandate, the upcoming repeal campaign to repeal what's been known as the transgender bathroom law. So a lot of things that we'd love for people to come to the State House. It's on March 21st, Wednesday, March 21st from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I think we're actually going to have a bus leaving from Burlington. So if you live in Burlington, you have no excuse. But please do consider that. You can find out more information about that too on our website at mafamily.org. So here I am plugging all the time, and I just got on the...
Okay, we just had the graphic up, and I'm sure we can put it up a couple more times. So,
During the course of
so
the show,
that's great. What's the date on that again?
It's Wednesday, March the 21st,
Okay.
and it's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., so in the middle of the day. So if you are working, please plan ahead, take the day off, even bring the kids down, make it a family event. We're super excited about it. We're expecting about 400 people to come down to the State House and lobby with their legislator. And just to put that in perspective, we had some Chinese friends of ours that went down to the State House about a month ago regarding an anti-discrimination law that they were concerned about. Almost 1,000 of our Chinese advocates showed up, and they said they were the largest group to come to the State House in 70 years. So I think when people think about the tipping point of change, it's not as great as people think it is, and I think that they rely on us to be ignorant to some extent, or even that attitude of, hey, what can I do? These politicians in Massachusetts are so liberal, and we'll never be able to get any of our conservative values into our laws. But truly, the tipping point is not as great as we think it is, and so 400 people at this lobby day is really going to be powerful.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So we're excited.
Michael, how did you affiliate with Mass Family Institute?
Yeah, so I've always, so Andrew Beckwith, who you know, who's the president of Massachusetts Family Institute, so he and I actually go, so he homeschools his 4 kids, and we homeschool our 5 kids, and so we had just known each other as friends. We had worked on a book together, which is this Engage the Bay State curriculum. And I've always done some volunteer work here and there with MFI. I mean, it's always been, I was a political science major in college, and just always very interested in government history, how we can bring change, good change to our laws, especially here in Massachusetts. So just always had an affinity, for what MFI does. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, we, like I said, I wanted to kind of, I brought this Engage the Bay State book. Now, we're sold out of our English version, so I brought this is the Chinese version. We actually have this book in Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese, and English. And this really goes over a lot of the issues that we are concerned about at MFI. And it's a wonderful 8-week curriculum with videos that introduce each chapter. If you're a part of a church and you have a small group and you have, you do like a Bible study or something like that, this really is a lot like that, where it's got a 20-minute video that introduces each chapter and talks about issues like, abortion, the transgender issue, which is a huge issue now in our schools. Joan, you and I were just talking about a meeting that's going on in Westford tonight to talk about gender identity, even as young as preschool. And we could talk a little bit more too probably tonight about just why are we teaching preschoolers about gender identity, because I don't know any preschoolers that are asking questions about their gender. But that's another obviously hot button issue, and we want to bring some common sense to that discussion.
So the name of the book again is?
Yeah, you can't read it in Chinese.
I can't read the Chinese version.
Yeah, so it's called Engage the Bay State. And everything that's in there is relative to Massachusetts. So you and I were talking about the case with the inmate that wanted to have the state pay for his sex reassignment surgery. And that's actually one of the stories that we highlight in the book. And, we give, MFI is obviously an evangelical type of organization. And so we give a biblical understanding of why we believe what we believe in each chapter, and then we describe how did we even get to this place. What laws previously took place, or what experiences took place to bring us to this point of these different issues in Massachusetts, and then And then just giving some points on how people can get involved. You know, what are the practical things that we can do to support the sanctity of life, you know, to support natural marriage, and to really stick up for our religious liberties, and then to keep ourselves from being polluted by things like recreational marijuana. You know, Andrew and I joke that, you know, we go into churches and we talk about sex, drugs, and not rock and roll, but I was part of a band, so, and Paul plays too, so if Paul came with me, I think we could do the rock and roll piece as well.
Yeah, really.
So,
like the issues that you usually don't talk about are the ones you have to talk about.
yeah,
Right? Yeah.
today we have to talk about them because
Issues, yeah.
our kids, I mean, our schools are ground zero for, you know, every single topic that we talk about is being talked about in our schools. And sometimes I feel like we just kind of, you know, I make this analogy that there's this ideological war going on, right? And there's these kind of ideological bombs that are being, you know, thrown in our schools. And I think a lot of times, you know, as parents sometimes or whatever, we just kind of meander through, but we don't realize that the minds of our kids, to a large extent, are at stake. And we need to take a very proactive role, you know, to protect their minds, you know, especially when it comes to all these things that they're being exposed to in our public school system especially.
And when did that really change? I mean, you know, it wasn't like this 30, 40 years ago. You know, what was the point at which things started really accelerating with all this agenda?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, you know, I think what comes to probably all three of our minds is, you know, when they started to take prayer out of schools, and I think that was even a conversation that was coming up with, you know, this whole thing that happened in Parkland, or all these horrible incidents that are happening in our public schools with gun violence, and so I mean, obviously, I would point to, look, if you're gonna, the crazy thing is that people blame God when bad things happen, but look, we're the ones that took God out of the schools, right? And so, who are we to say, how dare you, God, for allowing this to happen?
Right.
You know, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but you know, even in the past 5 years, we've seen this. Even this transgender agenda has just become exponentially more vivid and more talked about. We talk about it in the book about the genderbread person, which is this curriculum taught to our middle schoolers. And I was at a church about a year ago talking about this issue, and I had a preschool teacher who was up in Peabody, and he said, yeah, he was just in a training, and they were training him how to teach the transgender agenda to preschoolers. And so in preschool, it's called the Purple Unicorn, and it's got this diagram that points from your brain is where you get your gender, and your gender has nothing to do with your anatomy. So, you know, it's just the most unbiological, illogical, really, thing that we're teaching our kids, because how can your gender not be tied to your anatomy, right?
Right.
Right.
You know, even when we talk about the inmate too.
Even in the context, if someone says that the gender is tied to the anatomy, even if someone says they think their gender is something other than what they physically present at, they're rebelling against their anatomy. So the base is always the anatomy.
Right.
You're starting with the anatomy.
Right.
For a parent in the community that, you know, works outside the home and doesn't homeschool their children, how would they get involved in perhaps finding out what the curriculum is? Because it was only this like casual conversation that you had with someone who happened to be an elementary school or a preschool teacher that you found out about the Purple Unicorn story.
Right.
That, you know, the issue is as to how people are taught about, how children are taught in the preschool level about gender and transgenderism as a preschool concept was the Purple Unicorn. So how would the average parent find out about that?
Yeah.
How do you become knowledgeable about this?
I think that you have to obviously be vigilant and be proactive and go to your guidance counselor or go to your principal, you know, go physically down to the school and ask for the curriculum. And one of the things that we do when we go and we talk at churches is we take the curriculum with us, because we've ordered curriculums, and you know, it's not surprising that the curriculum that is in our public schools, the sex ed curriculum that we're talking about, is developed by Planned Parenthood, right? So that's something that parents should know right off the bat. But as you flip through the pages, I mean, I should have brought it tonight, but there's a 7th grade curriculum that has this Excel spreadsheet of how to protect yourself in, sexual intercourse protection. And so, the schools will say, oh, yes, we teach abstinence, and they do. It's the first line item on the Excel spreadsheet. But then there's 25 other lines, and it's stuff that I would never even talk about on this show because you'd have to rate the show, right? But
yeah, it's presented to 7th graders.
But it's presented to even younger than 7th graders, and we had gone down to the State House because one of the lines talked about non-microwavable saran wrap. So I won't even go farther than that, right? And we even had a hard time going to CVS and finding non-microwavable saran wrap. But we took it down to the State House and we, kind of ripped off pieces and gave them to each legislator and said, this is what you're teaching our kids in the name of medically accurate and, safe for our youth. Really what you're doing is you are opening their minds up to things that they never would have thought before. And so really what it's doing, instead of protecting our youth, it's actually increasing the amount of sexual activity that our kids are doing. So it's very concerning. And I think if more parents, even parents that didn't agree with our mission or our belief system, I think if they really understood what's being taught to their kids, they'd have a lot of concern.
Now, is this mandated statewide? Is this a statewide
So
curriculum?
one of the things that we're concerned about is this sex ed mandate, right? So in the fall last year, our state Senate, which is comprised of 40 senators, they voted about 33-6 to pass what's called the sex ed mandate. And what that does is it takes the power away from the local school committee and puts it all at the state. So if you're a state, local power, person, you care about that, which I think we all should. You should be very concerned about the sex ed mandate, and that's probably going to come up for a vote this spring. And like I said, it passed 33-6 in the Senate, never made it to the House. And I think a lot of the reason it didn't make it to the House is because we had raised a lot of awareness to that. But all the more reason for your viewers to come to our lobby day and speak face to face, with your legislator in regard even to this particular issue of the sex ed mandate. And the local state concern is just one of the concerns. I mean, we've talked about the curriculum that's put out there. I mean, one of the things that comes up in the curriculum is these role plays, and I think it's the 9th grade curriculum, and it says, Sally's pregnant. And how do you have a conversation with Sally with this unwanted pregnancy, okay? With this unwanted pregnancy, how can you help Sally basically hide this information from mom and dad, right? And find a way to get, perhaps an abortion or, and even this whole thing of lowering the age of consent from 18 to 16, right? That's something that they want to pass at our State House as well. And even if you're a 15-year-old girl, consent can come from your guidance counselor, from your Uncle Joe, from, people outside of your parents. And we're seeing this, we've talked about parental rights being kind of the new frontier that we're super concerned about. But we definitely see it here just in our own sex ed curriculum where we're teaching, our kids' peers, their teachers, are literally teaching them information that is saying, hide this from your parents, and we're going to show you how to do that. It's very concerning.
It is very concerning. And
whereas as a parent, you're responsible for the medical care for your son or daughter till age 18,
yeah.
And yet this whole component of your son or daughter's life is being turned over to school authorities, to guidance counselors,
That's right.
to teachers, to their peers.
Yeah.
I don't think, even a child with tremendous self-composure should be counseling another individual that's age 14 or 15 with regard to such a an important decision. You would like to think, and there's other ways around this. I'm not going to talk about the legal method for someone who feels like they can't speak to a parent about a pregnancy or something like that. But this, even going back to the Excel spreadsheet, if abstaining is one category and then there's 25 other, it sounds almost like an a la carte menu, and that's what kind of frightens me.
Yeah.
It seems to put more ideas into people's heads, young people's heads, than necessarily need to be there. And so just thinking about it, as a parent, I think one of the things that would be better for a parent to do is to find out what the curriculum is and also what the reading list is. And then if you're concerned as a parent, I guess you would take it to your PTO and then also to the principal and the assistant principals. Yeah. And maybe see if you can get some rally from other parents that are concerned about the same matters, because no matter what your faith base is in your family, Judeo-Christian, Hindu, whatever your faith base, you may care about what's being taught to your son or daughter that may contradict what your family's faith is. And I think that's...
Right, or just the simple eroding of parental rights.
Yeah.
Right.
That's... you just see that continually, and it's progressing where, like you say, things are being hidden from parents. And you also see where just a few parents can really make a difference when somebody really... steps in, whether it's the principal or the school committee or whatever. They can really make a difference when you get involved.
Yeah, a lot of our schools are passing what's been called the transgender school policies, right? And there's actually 4 different things about these policies that we are very concerned about. And at the top of that list of 4 is parental rights. And so if you look at the policy, it actually says, and I'm not kidding, you can read the policy for yourself. If you want a copy of the policy, you can get in touch with us at Mass Family and we'll send it to you. But it says there that if a child is transitioning at school, their gender, and the staff knows the parents of the child and subjectively decides that the parent it's this term called highly rejecting parents, right? So if the staff makes that subjective decision and says you're a highly rejecting parent, then the school policy says don't tell the parent. Don't tell can you believe it, right? Don't tell the parent. And not just that, if you think that's bad enough in regard to parental rights, then it says bring in counselors that your tax dollars are paying for as a parent to counsel that child into that transition. And again, don't tell the parent, because our ideology as the school staff is morally superior to the parent, and the parent is a liability to the child. And you're going to make that whole subjective decision when most likely you don't know the parent, right? You might just have this one part of your life that you disagree on, right? But that's we talked about the Ohio case, right? Where just in the news this past couple weeks, literally a girl has been pulled out of her home because she wants to identify, I believe she wants to identify as a male, or it could be the other way around, but that the parents don't agree with the transition and the grandparents are kind of okay with it, they're tolerant of it. But now the thing is in court because the DCF of Ohio, wants to pull this child out of this abusive home. Now, when did it become abusive that you and I think that your anatomy determines your gender? Is that abusive? I mean, I know this is a hot topic issue, and I'm not meaning to make light of it because there are kids that are suffering. Like, totally, I get that part of it, but we need to define what it actually is so that our kids can get appropriate help, because I care, I know we all care that, look, kids that identify as transgender are 20% more likely to take their own lives, and it's very concerning. And that's why we would say, look, we want to diagnose this in a healthy, way that's really going to lead that kid to become comfortable in their own skin. You know, because statistically, and you're not going to hear this in mainstream media, but statistically, kids that identify as transgender, 75 to 90% of them go back into a heterosexual lifestyle by the time they turn 19 or 20. So, you know, eventually it catches up with them, right?
This is my concern for any of us. We all have, I think. You may too, I'm not sure. But if you've raised a child through their adolescence, it's a time of turmoil for your average son or daughter. And obviously, there's a wrinkle in there if someone does truly feel that they're in the wrong gender, in the wrong body. My concern is that if outside forces besides the parents are coming in and assisting that child in their moment of confusion to pick a gender that they think that they align more with, and then the cross-gender hormones are given to that child, they are now locked into that new gender, like it or not. And adolescence is a difficult enough time. I think decisions as to what your final anatomical state will be and your final gender should be something that's done at age 18, at 19. And this is the conundrum too, because if the current medical mental health dynamic here for adolescents is that the adolescent brain is not fully developed until age 25. And that's being used in certain circumstances to talk about the criminal responsibility of certain individuals. And also, this is why also, you know, actually medical care is extended to age 26. This was part of the extension of medical care for children till age 26. So if the adolescent brain, to our understanding currently, from a mental health perspective, is not fully formed till age 25, why would you let someone permanently alter and their body into a certain gender in perhaps what might be a phase of confusion? Because adolescence, it's a time of turmoil. Your body is changing very rapidly in terms of hormones. For anyone, that's a challenge. But to lock into an opposite gender with cross-gender hormones and perhaps surgical intervention as well, it's horrifying. You know, if I thought I would Napoleon Bonaparte, would you cut off my arm? No. And gender dysphoria is ultimately it's body dysphoria.
There's a lady, you might have heard of her, Dr. Cretella. She's been on the news. She's a pediatrician out of Rhode Island, and she has a lot of really great medical information to share on this topic. But one of the things she shares, which I think is just such a great example, is she does a lot of counseling to young kids that are dealing with gender identity issues. And she said that she had this 5-year-old boy that wanted to identify as a girl. And so she just did a little bit more research in what's going on at home with this particular boy, and to find out that he has a 3-year-old sister who has special needs. And mom and dad were putting all this attention on the 3-year-old girl, which you would expect because she has special needs. And then you know where this is going, right? 5-year-old boy thinks mom and dad like girls more than boys. And so he then thinks, oh, well, then I just need to transition into a girl. And so Dr. Cretella says, and so she just said, I counseled this boy just to understand that, hey, she has more needs than you do at this time in your life. And that's completely fine. And he came to understand that. And then he became comfortable in his own skin. And I think when we hear stories like that, instead of what we hear in the media is, you know, examples of parents that are like, you can decide whatever you want to be, child, you know, and you know, whenever you decide that, let us know. And I mean, goodness, there's a high school assignment that I don't have a slide for, but at the top of it, it's actually given to our high school students all across Massachusetts, and it basically says at the top that your gender identity is not set in stone. In fact, it can change day to day. Mark how you feel today, but don't feel limited, because tomorrow you can pick something different, right? This whole a la carte when it comes to your gender. Now, this is an assignment, and it gets at this whole point of, is this an agenda or is this an anti-bully tolerance campaign? Clearly, it's an agenda that's actually making kids that never question their gender to now question. And then there's 5 spectrums on this particular assignment. And the top one is male or female is a spectrum. And then it says, what did the doctor assign you at birth? Okay? So not what your anatomy, you know, what you were anatomically, but what the doctor thought, okay? And then one of the spectrums is, how does the world see you? And I always have the example of, and it's masculine, feminine, and you're somewhere on this spectrum, right? And so I always bring up the example of when I was 12, going through puberty, entering into adolescence, I sang in the choir and my voice hadn't changed. I was still in the upper registers, right? And so I was the only boy, maybe one other boy and me, in the soprano section, So how did the world see me? Probably as feminine. And this is the dangerous part, because I don't have any control over how the world sees me, right? So if I were to look at that spectrum and say, you know what, I'm not fully masculine there, maybe I'm more feminine. And now I've put myself on the spectrum, and if I'm going through some kind of, maybe there's some kind of tragedy or some kind of very difficult emotional issue in my life, that I'm trying to find community, I'm trying to find love, I'm trying to find acceptance, and now I'm questioning all these things, and I'm finding that the people that are most communal in my life, are these LGBTQ groups. Well, now I'm joining that group, not because I agree with the ideology, I'm joining that group because I find love in that group. And it's great that the kid finds love and community, but just not in a lifestyle that medically does not have a good ending in many situations. So, there's so much from the other side that needs to be a part of this conversation. And, I hope that even things like tonight is a step in the right direction to do that.
So parents need to be involved and educated on what their kids are learning in the schools, and make sure they communicate with their children, and just to keep an eye on what they're being taught.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the other topics, let's see, that's so much. Actually, physician's assistant suicide.
Yeah. So back in 2012, I'm sure you remember that we narrowly defeated this on the ballot by 2 points. I think it was 49-51. And I think a lot of the reason we defeated it was because the Catholic Church in particular really got behind it, and was a big proponent to oppose it. But this is when we talk about the sanctity of life, we're concerned not just at conception, but at natural death, right? And I always think about, there's this question that, even the church, people say, oh, should Christians be involved in politics? That dirty word. And I always think of James 1:27, the brother of Jesus says that the definition of religion is to take care of the orphan, take care of the widow, and keep yourself from being polluted by this world. And look, if you're a Christian, if you're not a Christian, if you believe in the Bible, you don't believe in the Bible, I think we can all agree that taking care of orphans and taking care of widows is a good thing. And why I raise that is because widows are typically the elderly in our society. And we definitely have a duty to protect them. And we have, we have great advances in palliative care. We have great advances in hospice care. Why in the world do we need to pass a law that legalizes suicide and basically legalizes the same exact pills that you would be given on death row? And the other side calls this, they call this death.
They call it compassion, right?
They call it compassion. They call it death with dignity, right? And I don't think it's death with dignity when you're taking the same pills that you're given on death row.
That's cruel and unusual punishment.
That's, amen. And look,
when they oppose it on the death penalty phase, so.
Yeah.
That's what they call hypocritical.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you only need to look to Europe to really see a foreshadowing of what can come, right? So in the book,
countries.
Yeah, exactly. So in the book we talk about Belgium. 1 out of 3 physician-assisted suicide deaths happen without explicit consent from the patient. So 1 in 3, okay? So you can see how the slippery slope. And now in the Netherlands, as you mentioned, these countries, now in the Netherlands, they are considering a law where if you are over the age of 70 and you are tired of living, that's the phrase, then you could legally take part in euthanasia for yourself, right? Getting to this point where you are too expensive to keep alive, right? I mean, this is really where this law goes. And that's why we need to educate. And another plug for our annual lobby day, where people that agree with us on these issues, they need to let their voices be heard. Because look, you might not be having this issue right now. Your mother, your grandmother might not be having this issue right now. But maybe your neighbor,
5 years from now,
or maybe 5 years from
you
now.
can kind of see this coming over the horizon.
That's right.
Have you reached out to other organizations like the Roman Catholic Church with regard to physicians-assisted suicide? Because they probably would join you on the lobby day then.
They would. I think that to a large extent, the Catholic Church has taken a sideline view on a lot of the issues that we're talking about tonight. But I think on the physician-assisted suicide, I think you're right.
They would lock arms with you.
I think they would lock arms.
Yes, they would.
You know, but look, as a community of faith, Catholics, Christians. I mean, I think 14% of Burlington is Indian,
Yes.
but they share a lot
The
of our
same
same values
values.
as well.
Yeah.
And 14%, I don't know what the number is. It 25,000 people live in Burlington, or
Roughly, yes.
Roughly, yes.
yeah,
Very good.
So you know, that's I mean, I still live in Burlington, so I kind of know some of these things. But that's what 3,500 people,
Yeah.
right? That's
It's a lot.
that's a lot.
That's a lot.
You know. So you know, and I always think too, you know, that back in the Revolutionary days, it was 3 to 6% of the colonialists, took up arms against the British,
Right,
right?
wasn't the
And,
majority.
yeah, it was this idea of 5% of a committed group can really tip the scales
And make a difference.
and make a difference.
So the person who thinks that their one voice doesn't matter, that's false.
It's very false.
They can really do a lot, have a lot of impact,
Yeah.
whether it's showing up for the lobby day or emailing their legislators, calling their legislators, attending the school committee meetings. There's lots of ways to make an impact.
Absolutely. So many ways. And a lot of people don't realize that they have an advocate in even in Massachusetts. They have an advocate in MFI, whether you are a high school student and you're watching these videos. I think the video is called All We Need Is Love, or Love Is All You Need, and they're showing this in all our health classes. It's just a very dark movie that's being exposed to 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. Main character is this 12-year-old girl, and basically everybody in this movie is homosexual except the girl is heterosexual. So it's kind of flipping the script, if you will, and trying to normalize this LGBTQ lifestyle. And so she's being incredibly bullied because she's a heterosexual, right? And so it's trying to show like us, all these heterosexuals are the biggest bullies, and they're causing all this pain on this poor little girl. And she's at the end of the movie, she takes her life, and they show it. And she's in a shower or a bathtub, and just horrific, right? And it's like, do parents know that while they're at work, their kids are being exposed? And look, as well as I do that your normal adolescent doesn't want to make a big stink, and doesn't want to, peer pressure is a big deal. And especially in this world of social media and online bullying and all this stuff. It's
Snapchat.
Absolutely. So, a lot of our kids, I'll go from church to church, and I'll have 17-year-olds and 14-year-olds get up and say, yeah, I've seen that movie for the past 4 years. I've had that homework assignment for the past 4 years, and I've literally had to rip it up. And I felt like I had no advocate, nobody to talk to. And so when we went in, I said, look, you have an advocate. We want to be we want to be your advocate when it comes to a lot of these things, and that you're not alone, so.
Right. Some of the other topics.
Yeah, there's that.
Family counseling ban.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
What's the involvement of MFI in that?
Yeah. So this is probably, of the 5 issues there, this is probably the craziest, right?
Okay.
So, so this is called the counseling ban, and basically, to sum this whole thing up, I guess you'd say Christian counseling, okay, would be equal. So Christian counseling on gender would be equal to child abuse if this law were to pass. So if you are a licensed therapist, okay? And you are doing what the other side would call conversion therapy, okay? Which the other side would describe as electric shock treatment. I mean, I've seen it described as kids holding ice cubes in their hands and electric shock therapy happening at the same time to take them from a homosexual lifestyle back to a heterosexual lifestyle. I mean, it's like the science fiction kind of stuff or the horror movie kind of stuff that is obviously not the case. But basically, if this law were to pass, the licensed therapist, if the child comes in and identifies on that LGBTQ spectrum, that you cannot convert them back or try to convert them back into a heterosexual lifestyle. And it even goes to the extent that the minor, 17 years or younger, cannot make the decision on their own to go back into a heterosexual lifestyle. So, you know, to a large extent, it's a religious liberty issue. It is a freedom of speech issue, perhaps, of even the minor, that again is like having no control over their own bodies. And as we said before, 75 to 90% of kids that identify on this LGBTQ spectrum, once they turn 19 or 20, they're coming back into a heterosexual life. And so what this law is trying to do is really trap kids before they get to 17 and say, no, you can't even make the decision to come back into this heterosexual lifestyle on your own. And you know, even would go to pastors, even because pastors are considered mandated reporters, right?
By the state. Yeah.
So if we redefine what is abuse, okay, so if a pastor is looking at the situation and Joe Minor, right, in his youth group is experiencing conversion therapy, and the pastor doesn't report it because that's now abuse, well, then he could be prosecuted under the same laws that we would prosecute a child abuser.
Right.
And that's just, now, and you think this is crazy, 7 states, including Rhode Island, have passed this bill. It was up for a vote in the fall. We had what I believe hundreds of people call the State House and table this bill, but it'll probably come back up in the spring. And another selfless plug for Lobby Day to come and tell your legislator to oppose the counseling ban.
It's good information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's more here.
I know, recreational marijuana.
Yeah, we could talk all night about recreational marijuana.
I want you back for another episode on
yeah.
that one. Yes. It's a hot button topic.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you just some stories I think that are very encouraging. So Acton is just down the street from me. In 1,200 people came out to the City Hall, Town Hall meeting. 1,200.
Wow.
When they were voting to have a moratorium and also to let the people vote, to have a town ballot, to vote to ban, so to pass like a zoning bylaw, general bylaw, and to have a town ballot to ban the sale, the testing, all the different ways that you can commercialize recreational marijuana.
Right.
And 1,000 of those 1,200 voted to pass the moratorium. And also 76% of them voted to let the people vote to ban recreational marijuana. So very encouraging. We're finding that there's a lot of buyer's remorse. There's 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts. 91 of those 351 voted against recreational marijuana when it was question 4 on the ballot.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we're finding that of those 91 towns and cities that actually take a local vote, it's almost always 80-20 to ban, when many times in 2016 it was somewhere in that 55 to 45.
Right.
But people thought that they were voting for medical marijuana. They thought, you know, it was more of a compassionate vote.
Right.
And they had no idea that they were letting in the next big tobacco, which is now big marijuana, you know, into our state.
That goes to one of the biggest things is how people are just not informed, and if people, you know, it's a tragedy, but we need to get people informed on these issues because, as you say, when people are fully informed on an issue, you know, the outcome is a lot better on, on things.
Yeah, the city of Lawrence was the first city to ban recreational marijuana in Massachusetts, and MFI took a real leadership role in that particular situation. We partnered with 30 Hispanic churches in Lawrence, and I think it was July 17th or 18th of 2017, about 200 of these wonderful Hispanic friends of ours went to the city council. And city council started at 7 o'clock. You had your chance to give testimony. There were probably 15 pro-pot activists that had no idea that church people were showing up that night. And one of them even said to the city council, "Do you understand that these are people from church? And you know, what do they know?" And this Hispanic lady, well-spoken, very professional, got up there and said basically, "How dare you come against the church like that? We are the first ones to be on the front lines when there's an addiction issue in the city of Lawrence, and how dare you lecture us, you know, on this issue?" And then pastors got up at the what I call the pulpit, you know, in the city hall, talking to the legislators. We were there until about midnight, and at midnight, the city council took a vote of 8-0 to ban recreational marijuana in the city of Lawrence. And I just think how cool for the city then to say, you know, it was the local church in Lawrence that led the way to protect our youth from really what is, it's fair to say that this is a hard drug because the level of THC that is now in marijuana is so much more incredibly higher than what it was in the 70s.
Right. This is not the marijuana that some adolescents' parents may have been smoking out in Woodstock back in the day, and people get very benign about, oh, it's just marijuana.
That's right.
It's far more potent these days. It's being manufactured into candies and brownies, and you know, people's dogs are getting poisoned with marijuana, like sitting on the counter. They think it's a brownie. People's children just grabbing a random brownie, not knowing it's laced with marijuana.
That's right.
I mean, I think initially the way that the marijuana lobby initially pushed this point was like, oh, it's a compassionate choice for people who are going through chemotherapy, that you know they can't eat appropriately or they're nervous or whatever, and that this would be a compassionate medical choice for them. And that's how that was portrayed initially. But as you pointed out, buyer's remorse.
That's right. And
it's true.
Yeah, statistically in Colorado, over 50% of the sale of recreational marijuana is edibles. Okay, so over 50%
chocolates, lollipops,
is edibles. And if you look at the pictures, you know, everyone knows what a Reese's peanut butter cup looks like. So how they sell it as an edible, it's called Hashies, and it's packaged just like a Reese's, but all it says is just Hashies in the same font, the same color. You know, also the Almond Joy is called, I think it's Ganja Joy. And again, same blue and white.
Cutesy little marketing.
Yeah. And then also these USB vapes. So so the minimum age is 21. Well, why are we selling USB vapes that kids can take with them to school?
Right.
And everyone's going to think they're just a USB that they plug into their computer, but really in there is the marijuana that they can smoke during the day. So, you know, look, when did people get addicted to cigarettes? When they were
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, yeah.
And all the statistics are saying that's when people are getting addicted to marijuana. Right. It's very concerning. I mean, the number one issue in the public school system in Colorado is pot, right? It's not failing grades, it's not bullying, it's not like the normal thing, you know, it's not gun violence, it's not, you know, these different things. It's pot, right?
Because the students are high.
Yeah.
What are they learning when they're high? And now that we know that the adolescent brain doesn't fully develop till age 25, if they start smoking marijuana at 13 pretty regularly and or making, you know, eating marijuana brownies, whatnot, you've got a brain that's now, you know,
been fried
for 12 years.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if you're going a lot of people say, oh, you know, this is an herb, this is a natural substance, it's not addictive, it's not a gateway drug, you know, we keep hearing these things, but you only have to look as far as the New England Journal of Medicine that has all these statistics saying, you know, it's highly addictive. It is a gateway drug.
Highly psychologically addictive, but
yeah.
people, we use it daily
Yeah.
and multiple times in the day.
Exactly.
They wake up, they're not feeling, you know, they're not feeling well, or they want to feel well.
That's right.
I mean, you know, they'll start smoking marijuana.
And it's worth pointing out, as we talked about before the show, it's worth pointing out that in 2008, we decriminalized marijuana, right? So you could have up to an ounce on you. And we talked about what an ounce is, right? An ounce is 40 joints. So you could get smacked with a fine of $150, not go to jail. And that was one of the concerns, right? Is keep people out of the jails when it comes to these kind of small crime instances. So you could have 40 joints. So if you wanted to smoke your recreational marijuana, you could smoke all you wanted to, right? And then in 2012, we allowed medical marijuana, right? So, and I think, look, I think to a large extent the jury kind of is still out. I don't think with the laced THC stuff, but maybe with the more natural plant, and maybe it's some pain issues. I mean, I've talked to people as I go from church to church,
Marijuana cream, yeah, I mean, there's all
yeah, I
kinds
mean,
of
there's
iterations of
yeah. So I mean, that's a conversation we can have. But so when you realize that in Massachusetts we decriminalized it and then we allowed medical, well, why in the world now are we letting in this $1 billion? Well, that's why, right? It's a $1 billion industry.
Right. It was a progressive thing how we did it, and that's probably the easiest way to get it past you.
Yes, and,
Yeah.
and the funny thing too is, with the state legislature passes it, and it's supposed to be medical marijuana dispensaries, and then it's going to be, and then recreational marijuana is going to be taxed to 12%. And of course, then they did a they did a runaround with regard to the people that pushed this and actually voted for it on the ballot, because then they decided to try to tax it at 25%, which
Right.
is double, more than double.
Well, I think they took it now down to 3% if you're a local municipality.
Okay.
But you know, I keep hearing stories about it's a cash business.
Right, it can't be.
There's many banks that you can't deposit this kind of income into. I mean, there's
Right.
so
There's security guards at these facilities,
Right.
these places. There's one around the corner from my office in downtown Boston.
yeah. So how
It's
do
called
you?
Patriot Care.
Okay. So how do you monitor from a tax standpoint, right? How do you monitor the money that's coming in and out if it's all in cash, number one, right? So there's just a lot of concerns that, like I said, people aren't aware about, and that's why they had buyer's remorse when they went to vote for it.
The buyers, the Watergate phrase, follow the money.
Yeah,
Big money.
yeah.
So what is MFI doing to help change the situation, or to educate voters, or
On the
Towns
marijuana
and cities.
issue?
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing is helping to develop citizen-led committees in these different towns, and so, like for example, Westboro was the first town in Massachusetts to ban recreational marijuana, and it was 4 moms really that led the charge, and they
Good.
yeah, it was amazing.
I'm glad to hear that.
They led this whole campaign. They had a local vote. They had a Get Out the Vote campaign. They passed at town meeting on the town warrant. They passed a zoning bylaw. They passed a general bylaw. They had an 80-20 vote, and I think that really shows that really we're seeing 20% is a consistent number when people understand what's going on. So I think we can honestly say 20% of the people are really for this, and 80% of the people are really against this. So it's by no means is this a majority issue. Now, so what we do, so we'll take, so one of those moms, she is more than willing to go from town or city to city. She was in Lawrence. She was at the town hall meeting or the city council meeting and giving an expert opinion, really. I mean, she's done all this research. And so, you know, a lot of times people just feel so intimidated because they don't have the information.
Right.
And so what we do is provide the experts. There was like a wonderful situation just last night in Marlborough where there was a city council meeting to talk about a moratorium. And one of our advocates had emailed me and said, hey, this meeting's going on today, and can you help get some people there? So I had just, we had some people in our database that lived in the city, and we emailed them, and a couple of them went over there and made great testimony. And I got this email in my inbox this morning saying, hey, thanks so much for sending these people over there. It was a great representation, and it was probably 50-50 on both sides, because the only people that showed up to the meeting in Marlborough were the people that had a stake in the medical facility or the, you know, what
Financial interest.
A financial interest.
Okay, to be
You know,
blunt.
Yeah, exactly.
Very blunt.
Yep.
And so, of course, they're going to show up. But it was great that, look, in Marlborough, it was last night at least, it was a 50-50 split in terms of those people that showed up. And that's not always the case when it comes to these issues that we care about.
Right. So if people want to stay involved in issues, can they sign up for email
Absolutely.
from Mass Family?
Yeah, so they can go right to our website, and you mentioned you have that slide, so at mafamily.org, and they can go on there and
There it is.
yeah, and sign up. There it is, and sign up for our. It's called our weekly e-alert, and every week we'll send out, you know, basically what's going on, and because as you can imagine in Massachusetts, you know, there's always something going on, and so they can stay informed that way, and then also. If they want to contact me directly, because a lot of times what I do, I mean, I love to get people's even cell phones and, you know, text them when for instance, a vote is coming up at the State House. And many times, as you can imagine, we're the last ones to know, right? So a lot of times we only have 3, 4, 5 days to organize. So if we can get people's cell phone numbers and text them, because you know as well as I do, junk mail, or we get so much in our inbox. So if we can just send you a short text and say, hey, 3 days from now, we need you to come down to the State House to oppose physician-assisted suicide. That is super powerful, and really what we're trying to do. And look, we've been at this for 1.5 years in organizing churches and people that care about our issues. And last year we had 200 people come to annual lobby day. This year we're going to have 400 people. Double it. And next year we're going to have 600 people, and it's it's just going to grow.
Chinese group.
Well, the hour has flown by, believe it or not. It's over, and it's been great to have you and to thank you for educating our viewers on the great work of Mass Family Institute.
Absolutely.
And don't forget about the lobby day. The date again is
March 21st. I'm like on American Idol, right? Text one.
Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday, March 21st, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. down at the State House. There is a bus leaving from Burlington from Fellowship up here on Center Street.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, and thanks again. Good night.
Good night.